When I first entered Catholic Memorial High School in 1984 in the fall, I was pretty shy, at least when it came to girls. And it's interesting because, it took a while for me to break out of that. And it was a very different time. There was no social media. We got a lot of our ideas about sexuality and relations between men and women from television and songs and the bad examples that other people were giving us and foolish advice and things that were in magazines. And there was an awful lot of, as I think there is in every age, uncertainty, bravado. I've already used the word shyness, kind of embarrassment about things, perhaps not as bad as in previous generations, but certainly it was a challenge. And it was hard to get good information. We didn't live in an age of instantaneous Googling or anything like that, or, message groups and forums that you could get useful advice and even the kind of affirmations like, oh man, you're normal and everybody else is going through the same thing. So I was 14, just turned 14 when I entered high school, and I'd gone through, a bit of a transformation. I went to this private middle school that I've talked about in other stories called University Lake School, and it was a very small school, big campus out in the middle of, kind of nowhere, and you were either rich or you were smart, and there wasn't a lot of overlap between the two for most of the students. And interestingly, in my class, which was maybe at its largest 25 students, we only had at the most 5 girls in my class. There was something weird about our particular class because that wasn't the case for the one younger than us or the one older than us, but that's what it was. And there was one who had a crush on me, but I wasn't really into her, and so she'd, like Valentine's Day, give me some candies or things like that. The girls, of course, that I had a crush on were not particularly interested in me, and I was pretty awkward when it came to that sort of thing. I did go on one date before high school, and that was with a girl who her mother was friends with my mother. As a matter of fact, my mom ended up going to work for her. And I had a thing for her, and she also clearly had a thing for me looking back at it. And man, was I, again, so awkward. And we went to Skateland. After my mom and I picked her up, we had a spaghetti dinner, then we went to Skateland, and we skated and had a good time, then went home. Over the summer, because my mother was in Parents Without Partners, I got introduced to a lot of other kids, and that was the summer that I started weightlifting, and earlier in that spring I'd gotten, in a major way, into heavy metal. I've also told that story. My friend Walter Clothier recorded Van Halen's 1984 for me, and there was extra room on the tape, so he put Iron Maiden's The Trooper, and I was just like, holy crap, what is this? And I got super into metal that summer and got into the Columbia Record Club, so got a lot of records that way, got some other records. Anyway, Parents Without Partners, we would go on these camping trips, and there were girls there too, and they went to public school. And interestingly, there were these 2 sisters, the Ron sisters. One was my age, one was a bit younger. And one was kind of tomboyish, and I had a crush on her, and her sister, who was much more of a girly girl. And back then that meant like poofed up hair and all that sort of stuff. She had a crush on me. And so it was sort of the classic case of, somebody's pursuing somebody who's pursuing somebody else. And they were pretty aggressive, we'll say, right? So didn't do anything with them, but learned a little bit about flirting and that sort of thing. And I got into lifting weights that summer as well. So I was starting to get kind of built, although I was still pretty thin, but at least I looked muscular. My arms were so skinny when I was in middle school that I would wear long sleeve shirts because I didn't want anyone to see it. So I was like, I gotta bulk up a bit, and chest, arms, legs, stuff like that. And I started dressing in a way that's kind of embarrassing now to look at. Somebody, a friend of mine, by the winter time, summarized it as everything Greg wears is black, sleeveless, or short. I used to wear, shirts with like mesh shirts over it, and I was growing my hair long. Took a while because my mom would slip some extra money to the girls who were cutting my hair to cut it shorter than I wanted. So I had a mullet, and that was that. And I wasn't wearing glasses, even though I really needed them at the time because I didn't quite know. I'd just squint when I had to look at the chalkboard. And I entered high school. And Catholic Memorial was a nice switch from this private school where things were very, very stratified by class. I didn't really fit in. I didn't have an awful lot of friends. To being in a place that had a much larger student body. Each class was about 250 students. You had a homeroom that you would go to, and all the kids with like your last name letter were in there. So, Sadler through I don't know who else. And there were a few before me. Char Saber sat in front of me because, Saber, Sadler. And there was a lot of like, flirting and boyfriend, girlfriend kind of stuff going on. Girls who liked guys would bake them cookies and bring them in. Nobody did that for me, but I hung out in a different kind of crowd too. That was more like the cheerleaders and the jocks, or the preps and the jocks. And anyway, I wound up getting involved with a bunch of different people, many of whom were older than me. And I'll tell this story. So hazing was a big thing at the time. And so the freshmen would get hazed by the seniors and other upperclassmen when they came in. They'd like make you wear a beanie or stuff like that. And I looked older than I was. And so I think a lot of people thought I was a transfer student rather than a freshman. I didn't get any of that trouble. Instead, I got a different kind of notice that I'll talk about in just a moment. So anyway, I know some kids there who had gone to my previous school. I had a friend Eric who was a jock. I had a friend Steve who is kind of in the nerd group, but also was extraordinarily strong. I mean, this guy was a huge weightlifter and also very musically talented and writing and stuff like that. And the girl who I knew from ULS, who had a crush on me, she also came in, and she would have been in, kind of the proto-goth group and all of that. So I decided that I'd wanted to learn fencing since I was a kid. I saw movies like The Three Musketeers and Zorro, and I wanted to be a sword fighter. So they had a fencing team. So I joined that. And later on in the spring, I'd run track. So I mixed with a lot of different groups. I hung out a lot with the people that were called the burnouts. Some people in other places called them freaks. They're the ones who are sort of on the fringe, listening to heavy metal, or in some cases to punk, wearing leather jackets, jean jackets, looking kind of tough. Same thing with the girls very often. Sometimes engaging in criminal activity. I've talked about that in another video about midnight sales and services. And so I got in with those people, and I also hung out with the jocks on occasion, although I was kind of on the fringe of that. And I would hang out with the nerds who I knew, who I was friends with. That was kind of it. And there was a lot of circulating around in different groups. So anyway, freshman year, I come in, kind of baby-faced, didn't realize how apparently, good I looked to a lot of these girls, particularly upperclassmen girls, so sophomores, juniors, seniors. And within the first 2 weeks, things start happening. I'm in a creative writing class, and it's for like freshmen and sophomores, and there's a couple sophomore girls. There was one there who I kind of liked, who was into heavy metal, and she got to see Billy Squier and Rat, and we're talking about that. But there was another girl in the class named Michelle, and she had a major, major crush on me. And she was a sophomore as well as this other girl was. And so she told her friend that she thought I was a drummer because I would take my pencils and I'd be like, drumming in class. I wasn't a drummer at all. I played clarinet in the band. And so her friend who was in the band, whose name was Liz, was like looking at all the drummers, and she's like, well, I don't see the guy that she's talking about. And then eventually she realizes this is the Greg Sadler that my friend is talking about. And then she decides that she likes me. And she starts calling me at home. And that was kind of uncomfortable for me. I didn't know what to make of this, People could have crushes on each other, and sometimes, you'd hear rumors, oh, so-and-so likes you, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the dance together and all that? And again, I was so shy, and I was trying not to appear shy, and sometimes that just makes it worse, right? So this girl starts calling me at home, and she's really pushing. She's really doing the whole full court press, as we say. She invites me to her family reunion at a park in Waukesha, and I'm talking to my mom, and I'm like, mouthing, say no, right? That I can't go. Because I don't want to turn her down because I felt bad. But I also was like, I don't know what's going on with this chick. She's, giving me a lot of compliments and all that. And so my mom says, absolutely not. You're not going to somebody else's family reunion real loud so it can be heard on the phone. And that was that. And she ended up actually kind of going off the deep end and being hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital for a while. But within that first week, I'm hanging out with sophomores and juniors, especially among the burnouts. And, they liked me, and they're like, hey, you should hang out with us in study hall or in the library. And they knew all these girls. And so I remember being in the library with this guy, Bob, and there was another guy, and there were some sophomore girls, and, they were in our kind of burnout clique, puffed up hair, lots and lots of makeup, dressing in sort of almost like a costume, you could say. And they start sending me notes in the library. And, some of it's kind of innocuous stuff like, what do you like to do? Where do you live? And all of that. And then the notes start being things like, hey, do you want to go make out? You want to go find a bathroom and maybe do something? Can we go out on a date? And I'm like, what the hell do I do? I don't know what to do with this sort of thing. It's on the one hand very flattering, and on the other hand you're put on the spot, and you're like, and I'm asking these older guys, and of course they're giving me terrible advice. They're like, do anything they'll go along with. Man, you don't know how lucky you are. You've hit the jackpot. And all I could think is, well, how do I get myself out of this situation? Right? And it's not that I wasn't interested in girls, but it was almost as if the girls I was interested in weren't interested in me, and other girls were instead. And the girls that were interested in me tended to be pretty aggressive that way. Fast forward, that continued on through sophomore year, there was a junior girl who was super interested in me in the burnout clique, and she was kind of bad news as well. And I would chat with them and all that, but yeah, I didn't go with them. And then I remember going to like parties, and because I would get invited to these parties, and they would be in Waukesha or Brookfield, quite a good ways away from where we lived out in the countryside. And it was girls inviting me to these parties, and my mom did not like that at all. That was not good, because my mom was, trying to be a good conservative Catholic. I think that would wear off after time, but she was like, absolutely not. And then my mom's boyfriend, was the guy who was like, you really should let your kid do some things. This is normal. This is what kids do in high school. So finally, she relented, and by like October, I'm going to these parties. And there wasn't a lot of drinking back then at those parties, but there was a lot of like going off and taking walks and who likes who and stuff like that. You would walk and you'd put your arm around somebody, and they'd put their arm around you. And if you got really adventurous, you'd put your hand in their back pocket. They would do the same with you. I mean, you think about it now, these things were like big things at the time. And there'd always be like a lot of like red-faced, who's doing what with who? Did they make out? So and then there was more parents without partners stuff. We would do things like go to a Holiday Inn, and each of us would get like a room, and then we'd go swim together and hang out together, and there'd be girls there too. Some of whom were already, like one of them was already pregnant by sophomore year, who I kind of liked, Heather. But, fortunately didn't get involved with her at all. And, we'd go to like parties, like Halloween parties, and there'd be a lot of flirting and stuff like that. I did go to a few dances. I didn't go to homecoming. I didn't go to prom until my senior year. But I would sometimes go to dances, and then you would like try to get up the courage to either dance next to somebody or ask them to slow dance with you. And if you went roller skating, there was also the equivalent of slow dancing, which is couples skate, And so that was kind of interesting as well. But you'd always be like, a little bit kind of wary and leery. And meanwhile, I'm listening to all this great heavy metal music that has all these themes of like parties and, hot girls and sex and stuff like that. And a lot of romantic stuff as well mixed in there. And so you got all these jumbles of ideas. You got your hormones going. You got people giving you all sorts of, you could say, bad direction about stuff. And the thing that kind of turned everything for me, and this is really quite funny to reflect upon. So we went on spring break to Florida, and we went to Panama City Beach, and it wasn't very touristy back then. This is before like all the college students discovered it, and MTV and all of that sort of thing. So long story short, we go down, three couples with their kids, my mom and my mom's boyfriend, and another couple, don't remember. All I remember is there was a girl, and she was my age with them, and then there was another couple, and the wife, or the woman in it, they weren't married, had a daughter who was a senior, and she went to school in Milwaukee, and then they had a younger daughter who was my sister's age. My sister's about 2.5 years younger than me. And anyway, this girl's name was Lori, and she was, quite attractive, and we'd sit out on the beach together and tan, and, she was like all about different kinds of music. She had me listening to the Velvet Underground and all that, and I'm listening to heavy metal, and that's all I'm really into. And somewhere along the line, she took a shine to me, And, one night we go out and we're going to swim in the ocean together. And, we do that and we're hanging out on the beach together. And then the next night we did it again. And I had my first actual kiss and lost my virginity on the beach with Rat and Motley Crue on my boombox. I had one of those boom boxes where you could put in a single tape, and when the tape got finished, it would play the other side. So it was like something out of a rock and roll fantasy, right? There is a song, by the way, by Bad Company called Rock and Roll Fantasy that I also had on another tape. And, then we had one more night together. By that time, my mom was getting pissed and, actually locked me out of the bungalow. So I slept in the car that night. And then we went home. And then this girl came out, with her mom and her sister to hang out at our place. And we were up in my bedroom. We probably would have been doing something up there, except my grandpa kept checking in on us. So we ended up just taking a walk. And then she asked me out on a date. And my mom, again, dead set against that. We ended up, the date was her coming out to pick me up at my mom's boyfriend's place in Elm Grove. We drive into Milwaukee. We, chat, we make out. She plays some kind of sexy music on her car tape deck, and then she takes me to a bar. I'm 14 years old. She takes me to a bar that she goes to regularly, and we get drunk and play pool, and then she drives me back, and we, make out in her car on the way back. And then she gave me mono. So I've talked about that before in another story. Mono sucks, mononucleosis. I'm basically out of things for the summer. Meanwhile, she gets interested in dating college guys. I try calling her on the phone. She's never home, So, writing's on the wall with that. And then in sophomore year, I go back to high school. And it all kind of starts again, but now I have a bit more confidence and, I don't have to worry about being a virgin and labeled as that anymore. But I was still pretty shy. It took me a while to kind of like feel confident about what I was doing and whether this is the right thing to do or not, or, and to be able to, we could say, be upfront and open about my desires and interest. And I wound up attracting quite aggressive girls who wanted to go out with me. Some of whom I did, some of whom I didn't. Some of whom, thank God I didn't, because maybe I would have caught something if I'd been with them. Others, we would, walk and hold, put our arms around each other and stuff like that, but, maybe kiss a bit, but not do all that much besides that. And it really wasn't until senior year, I would say, that all these stars started aligning for me and I became much more confident and I'll just say I enjoyed myself quite a bit. In that time. So, thinking back to that era, I'm so distant from that now, in my college years and graduate school. I had a lot of relationships. I kind of knew what I was doing by then. I understood flirting and going out and all these sorts of matters. Still made a bunch of dumb mistakes, but man, was I shy and awkward starting high school. And that might have actually been a little bit of the charm. Who knows? But it's funny to look back on the person who I was back then, so earnest, trying to make sense out of all of these things and getting so much bad advice from so many different quarters. I'm kind of lucky I didn't wind up in more relationship issues than I was. I'll also mention one other thing too to bring this to a close. So I think it was sophomore year. Um, there were a bunch of girls that were kind of nerdy. I was in an AP Brit Lit class, and they wanted to organize a literature reading and poetry group over the summer. And by then, I was actually writing poetry, and I would sometimes let people see it, more girls than guys. And I remember there were a couple girls in that group that were like, "We got to get Greg in this," and they were always pitching it like, "Yeah, because he's so smart and all that." But then I would hear them, and it was some of them had a crush on me and wanted me to go and hang out with them because of that. And I didn't drive, and my mom wasn't going to drive me most places, so that was kind of a no-go at the time. But that was kind of typical of what was going on in my school. And I will mention that there was one very, very special girl who I met but didn't date because she ended up dating the guy who was like my arch rival, who we met my sophomore year, her freshman year. Later on, she would call me her locker leaner. She had a crush on me. I thought she was pretty cute as well. And then we lost track of each other. She left and went to a different high school. We encountered each other again in the 90s. And you may know her as Andy Shaka, my wife, who I reconnected with. I've told this story as well late 2009 through Facebook. And we started writing to each other, fell in love with each other, decided to make a life together, and we've been together now, married. This year, 2025, we'll have been married for 14 years. So it's interesting how all these things work out, right? Anyway, that's the story. It's mostly about high school, but a few other things along the way.